The wind groans like a wounded creature, and the sea claws violently at the jagged rocks encircling the abandoned lighthouse on Blackwater Point. Questions linger in the air like fog. Why did every keeper assigned to this place vanish without a trace? Why was the tower sealed by the Coast Guard decades ago? And why, despite the isolation, do fishermen still report seeing its light flickering at midnight? Tonight, as the narrator approaches the rust-eaten gate, the beam ignites again, sweeping over the waves as if guided by invisible hands. The lighthouse stands tall and silent, its top lantern glowing with a cold, unnatural shimmer. The narrator hesitates, feeling the heavy pulse of dread, but steps forward, driven by the need to uncover the truth buried within this forsaken tower. The night swallows everything except the narrow path ahead. The narrator walks along the damp stone path, each step echoing faintly against the cliffside. The scent of salt and decay fills the air. The lighthouse door, swollen with age, hangs crookedly on its hinges as though someone had forced it open recently. The narrator questions who could have been here before, and more disturbingly, why there are fresh footprints in the mud despite the storm. The footprints are oddly spaced, as if the person walked in a strange, uneven gait. Seagulls circle overhead, but do not cry, as if silenced by the place itself. The narrator pushes the door open, revealing the spiral staircase stretching upward into darkness. The interior walls are covered in peeling paint, water stains, and long, deep scratches that look disturbingly intentional. Something cold drips from above, landing on the narrator's wrist, a thin line of seawater mixed with something darker. The narrator steps inside and the door slams shut behind them, rattling the lighthouse's hollow core. The spiral staircase creaks as though reacting to the intrusion. Questions rise again. Why is the lantern lit when there's no electricity flowing to this place? Why does the air hum faintly, as if something is whispering just beyond hearing? The narrator shines a flashlight upward and watches dust swirl like ash in a dead hurricane. The scratches along the wall seem to follow a pattern, spiraling upward, always pointing toward the lantern room. At the base of the stairs lies an old logbook, sealed shut by moisture and time. When the narrator picks it up, the pages flutter on their own, stopping on the last entry. The ink is smeared but readable. The light calls to them. I cannot stop it. I am no longer alone. A chill crawls across the narrator's spine. Clutching the logbook, the narrator begins ascending the staircase. Every few steps, the sea crashes violently against the rocks outside, sending tremors through the tower. The narrator notices ropes dangling from metal hooks along the stairwell, weathered, frayed, and strangely knotted. Were they once used by the keepers? Or were they restraints? Higher up, the faint humming grows louder, vibrating through the walls like a heartbeat. The narrator pauses at a landing where an old oil lamp lies shattered. Dark stains soak the floorboards around it. Something metallic glints beside the stain, a broken compass, its needle spinning erratically despite the still air. The narrator pockets it, though unsure why. Another question emerges. Why does the compass needle point upward, toward the lantern room, as if something powerful is pulling it? The stairs continue narrowing as the lighthouse breathes around them. The narrator reaches the second floor, where a small keeper's room sits partially collapsed. The walls buckle inward, as if crushed by an unseen force. A bunk bed leans at a disturbing angle, its mattress torn open with stuffing spilling out. Oddly, there are indentations on the mattress, as if someone, or something, had been lying there recently. Rainwater drips rhythmically through a crack in the ceiling, pooling beneath a warped wooden desk. The narrator notices faded photographs scattered across the floor, lighthouse keepers smiling stiffly beside the tower. Yet in each photo, the background reveals a faint human silhouette standing near the lantern room rail, even in images taken decades apart. That silhouette grows slightly more defined over time. The narrator trembles, pocketing one of the photos, then continues climbing. With each step, the humming deepens, now resembling a low, mournful moan echoing from above. The third-floor landing is cold, bitterly cold, far colder than the outside storm. The narrator's breath fogs in the air, despite the humid seaside climate. Strange symbols are carved into the floorboards, circles intersecting with jagged lines, all directing toward the center of the lighthouse. The compass needle violently spins whenever the narrator stands near the carvings. A sudden rush of cold air sweeps through, extinguishing the flashlight for a moment. When it flickers back on, the narrator sees a rope swaying gently overhead, though there is no breeze. A faint outline of a person seems to cling to the rope, almost visible, almost reaching. But as the narrator blinks, it dissipates into shadow. Heart pounding, the narrator continues upward, gripping the railing tightly. The humming changes again, becoming a rhythmic pulse that matches the beating of the narrator's heart, as if syncing with it. Halfway to the lantern room, the narrator feels the tower trembling under their feet. The storm outside grows louder, but the humming inside dominates all other sounds. The staircase narrows further, forcing the narrator to squeeze through. On the wall beside them, fresh scratch marks appear, not old, not faded, but new, as if made moments ago. They form long vertical lines that resemble tally marks, each group separated by an empty space. The narrator counts them. 7, then 7 more, then another 7. A cold realization sets in. Were these counting days, victims, or something else? Suddenly a loud thud echoes below, as if someone stepped onto the bottom floor. The narrator freezes, listening. Another thud, then another. Slow, deliberate, ascending. Something is climbing the stairs. The narrator forces themselves upward, refusing to look back. The humming now feels like a warning. Reaching the 4th level, the narrator enters what was once the machinery room. The gears, chains, and pulleys that operated the lighthouse lantern lie rusted and broken, scattered like bones. But one gear, the largest, turns slowly, scraping against metal despite having no power source. The narrator watches it rotate, releasing a screeching howl like metal suffering. Rings of rope are piled in a corner, each tied into different knots. Some knots look nautical, others appear ritualistic. The narrator spots an open journal pinned beneath a heavy wrench. Its pages flutter violently, although there is no wind. The most recent entry is shockingly clear. The lighthouse chooses its keeper. The light must never go dark. If it dims, they come for him. As the narrator reads, the lantern light above suddenly brightens, sending a sharp beam through the cracks in the wooden ceiling, forming a thin vertical line of blinding white. The narrator climbs toward that beam, nearing the lantern room. The stairs feel uneven, almost shifting beneath their feet. The tall windows lining the walls show the storm thrashing violently outside, but the lighthouse interior remains strangely untouched by rain. Lightning flashes, illuminating a distorted reflection of the narrator in the glass, elongated, stretched, as though the lighthouse itself warps reality. The humming grows louder with every step, transforming into a deep, throbbing vibration that shakes the narrator's bones. Questions flood the narrator's mind. What happened to the last keeper? Why did the lantern ignite by itself tonight? And who or what is climbing from below? The narrator hears the slow, steady footsteps rising ever closer. Panic builds. As the narrator reaches the final steps, the lantern light dims for a moment, causing the entire tower to shudder violently as if something ancient stirs within its core. The narrator enters the lantern room, stepping into a circular chamber bathed in pale, unnatural light. The massive Fresnel lens stands in the center, rotating slowly despite the disconnected machinery below. Outside the glass panes, the storm rages, but the interior remains eerily calm. On the floor lies a coat, thick and weathered, the uniform of a lighthouse keeper. A name tag rests beside it, corroded but readable. The narrator recognizes the name from the logbook entries. The coat's sleeves are stretched unnaturally, as though someone with elongated limbs had worn it. The narrator approaches the lens, noticing that the light source inside is not flame or electricity, but something pulsating, like a beating heart. The humming rises to a deafening intensity. Behind the narrator, the footsteps finally stop. The air thickens, and the room grows impossibly cold. Someone or something has reached the top. The narrator forces themselves to turn around slowly. The staircase entrance is empty. No figure stands there. But the air is heavy, dense, and oppressive. The unseen presence seems to fill the entire space, pressing inward like an invisible tide. The coat on the floor shifts slightly, as if brushed by a passing breeze. The pulsating lantern light expands and contracts in sync with the humming. The narrator studies the Fresnel lens and realizes its beam is no longer aimed outward to sea. Instead, it's slowly rotating toward the interior of the room, illuminating the walls with an eerie glow. The scratches on the walls match the tallies seen earlier, continuing unbroken all the way to the ceiling. The narrator steps back as the light locks onto them, casting a long shadow that stretches unnaturally across the floor. The humming stops abruptly, leaving only silence. The silence is more terrifying than the humming. The narrator feels every hair on their body stand upright. The lantern light pulses again, brighter, hotter, casting sharp beams that expose hidden carvings etched along the walls. The carvings depict human figures ascending the lighthouse, growing more distorted with each level until their shapes become monstrous. The final carving shows a lone figure trapped inside the lens, arms outstretched, face contorted in agony. Panic builds as the narrator realizes that each keeper documented in the photos may still be here, transformed, absorbed, or extinguished by the tower. The footsteps resume, now circling the lantern room, though nothing is visible. The compass in the narrator's pocket vibrates aggressively, its needle pointing directly at the glowing heart inside the lens. A low creak echoes behind them as the keeper's coat begins to rise from the floor. The coat lifts into the air, filling out into the shape of a body, tall, twisted, impossibly elongated. The sleeves dangle like boneless limbs, swaying with unnatural grace. The narrator steps back, stumbling against the lens housing. The coat turns slightly, as though acknowledging the narrator's presence. The pulsating lantern light intensifies, bathing the room in blinding white. The narrator feels a pull, a tug deep within their chest, drawing them toward the lens. The light flickers, and in its brief dimming, the narrator sees faces hidden within the glass, hollow-eyed, screaming silently, trapped in eternal orbit. The coat moves closer, dragging invisible weight across the floor. The narrator realizes the humming was never mechanical. It was the voices of the keepers, resonating through the tower, bound to the light. The narrator tries to run, but the floor heaves like a living thing. The narrator collapses beside the lens as the coat hovers above, its sleeves reaching downward like tendrils. The lantern brightens again, and the beam locks directly onto the narrator's face. A force pushes them back, pressing their spine against the cold glass of the Fresnel lens. The carvings on the walls begin to glow faintly, lines connecting like veins spreading across the tower. The light pulses faster, syncing with the narrator's heartbeat. A realization dawns. The lighthouse isn't haunted by the keepers. It consumes them. The tower needs a living host to power the lantern, and with every keeper lost, the light only grows hungrier. The footsteps circle closer, though nothing human produces them. The coat's shape bends forward, leaning until its empty hood nearly touches the narrator. The air hums again, soft at first, then thunderously loud. The narrator braces for the moment the coat envelops them, but suddenly the humming stops. The lantern flickers violently, then extinguishes completely. Darkness floods the room. For a heartbeat, nothing moves. Then a deep groan shakes the tower. The coat collapses to the floor like a lifeless rag. The trapped faces in the glass fade. The narrator realizes the truth. The lighthouse does not choose a keeper. It reflects one. The light activates only when someone enters who is already bound to it. The narrator feels an icy weight inside their chest, remembering the silhouette that appeared in every photograph, growing clearer across decades. It was never a previous keeper. It was the narrator, reflected backward through time by the tower's cursed lens. The lighthouse has been calling them their entire life, and now, with the light extinguished, they finally answer.